So welcome to today's presentation on multidimensional healing through the chakras. This is one of my passion areas. I am incredibly passionate about finding the bridges between science and spirituality, the places where what we know in our 3D human lives today connects to what we know from thousands and thousands of years of spiritual wisdom. And so we're really going to be finding the balancing point between those two today and looking at how can we use this balance of information to really understand ourselves, our energy, our health and well-being to create a true roadmap to healing through the chakras. So we're going to be diving into a completely different view of the chakras than anything you've seen before. So let's get started. So for today's presentation, we're going to be taking two main perspectives to this because these are the two perspectives that I firmly believe in and really utilize in my day-to-day life. And the first is that of the mind, right? We all are very familiar with our mind. It's very logical, rational. It wants to know the step-by-step process. It wants evidence-based proof, aka the scientific part of ourselves. And then the second perspective that we're going to be using is the soul perspective, the one that's intuitive and experiential and feeling based, that part of us that knows that there is more to this world than what meets the eye. And that's going to be our spiritual perspective. So we're really going to lean into both of these in today's presentation. So the very first place that we need to start is by understanding that everything is energy. And if you're listening to this conversation, obviously you already know that this is true, right? But we also know this from a scientific perspective, even though a lot of the time science tends to sweep the idea that energy is everything under the rug. But when we are in basic chemistry class, something that everybody has to take, right? We learn that the world is made up of atoms. And what are atoms but protons, neutrons, and electrons? And what are protons, neutrons, and electrons but electrical charges, right? And so, in other words, everything in our world, from a scientific perspective, is made up of an electrical charge, in other words, of energy. From a spiritual perspective, we see this idea across the world throughout time, right? We have chi or ki in Chinese philosophy, Reiki in Japanese philosophy, prana, Holy Spirit, mana, vital force, and many, many more. This idea that there is an energy underneath this physical reality, that there is more here than meets the eye, is pervasive, no matter how we look at it. And so this is really going to be the foundation for our understanding today, because what this means is that for everything in this physical world, there is what I like to call an energetic blueprint. So, quantum physics and spiritual theories both highlight the existence of an energetic blueprint for our physical reality, right? We know that everything is made up of, again, those atoms. We know that now we have quarks and all of these subatomic particles. We know that beyond what we can see, feel, hear, taste, and touch, there's this entire depth of reality that for scientists, we need a microscope to see. But for those of us who are leaning into the spiritual side, we know that we just need to awaken our intuition in order to be able to feel the energy channels, the chakras, things like the meridians, the nadis, the sen, right? So spiritual theories like traditional Chinese medicine, for example, believe that energy flows through our bodies through meridians, whereas modern medicine, or the scientific side of things, believes that energetic impulses flow through our nervous system. And there's actually a lot of really fascinating research happening right now about whether the nervous system and the meridian map lines up and is the same thing. And oftentimes, you'll find that the map of the meridians, when you put it over a map of the nervous system, actually does line up, which is really fascinating and really exciting. This idea that, from a scientific perspective, we have electricity flowing through our nervous system at all times. That's how we interact with the world around us. But from an energetic perspective, we have energy flowing through us at all times. And we're seeing this place where the science and the spirituality meet. So we can understand that for everything in this physical world, there is an energetic blueprint, something deeper. Now, let's shift gears a little bit here and start with our scientific medical perspective by talking about the nervous system, right? So the nervous system, again, our electricity, our energy from a medical perspective is constantly flowing through our body, through our nervous system. We know this, right? We have our central nervous system, which is made up of our brain and our spinal cord, and then we have our peripheral nervous system, essentially everything else, right? Our arms, our digestive system, everything else is our peripheral nervous system. And our peripheral nervous system functions in two main nervous system states. You've probably heard of these. They're big buzzwords right now. We have our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. This is when our body is priming us from a biological perspective to run, to flee, to get away from danger. When our nervous system feels like we're in danger, we tip into the sympathetic response. This looks like an increase in our blood pressure, our heart rate, our stress hormones. It decreases our immune response. Hello, getting sick very often, right? And this is activated by stress. And we're going to talk more about stress here in a little bit. But the spiritual perspective of this is that when we are in a sympathetic nervous system state, our energy is not flowing. We are out of balance when we're in a sympathetic state. But the other state that our peripheral nervous system has is the parasympathetic state. This is our rest, digest, and heal function. So this is where we see an increase in blood flow, digestion, mood, and immune response because all of our energy is now being redirected back to our vital organs so that we can rest and heal. In other words, there is no possibility of us healing unless we are in a parasympathetic nervous system state. So from a spiritual perspective, this is where we would say that energy is flowing. Our energy is aligned and balanced and moving when we're in a parasympathetic state. And I do have a little note here at the bottom that says that there's this really interesting theory right now, polyvagal theory, that's suggesting 3 states. And there's more information about that in the workbook if you want to check that out. But for today's purposes, we're going to focus on these 2 main states, sympathetic or stress and parasympathetic or rest. Now, let's talk about sympathetic activation here for a little bit because we all know this as being stressed. Because of the pace of our lives, our jobs, our thoughts, the way that our society is set up, almost everyone is pretty much constantly in a state of sympathetic activation. Think about how many times over the last day, let alone the last week or year, that you have said that you've felt stressed or overwhelmed or tired or anxious. All of those are states that are connected to our sympathetic activation. And when we have a chronic sympathetic activation, or in other words, when we're stressed for a long time, it can lead to a slew of health issues from anxiety and depression to sleep problems, heart disease, headaches, digestive issues, and more. And what we find is that these health effects actually look a lot like the health effects that we see from the impact of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Now, the ACEs were 9 specific childhood events that have been linked to a number of different health outcomes, like you can see here: heart disease, depression, substance abuse, asthma, COPD, cancer, diabetes, all kinds of things, right? But we also know that childhood trauma as a whole can lead to these impacts. Why? Because childhood trauma leads to chronic sympathetic activation. So let's dive into that a little bit more. A sympathetic nervous system state, right, is caused by what we called stress. Our body knows when it is stressed or not stressed, depending on the activity of a little center of our brain called the amygdala. You guys might have heard of this called the lizard brain, right? It's the part of our brain that says we're either safe or we're not safe. It's a very primal function. So when our amygdala is activated, it sends messages to the hypothalamus, which then communicates with the rest of the body, hey, we're stressed. We need to go into that sympathetic state so that we can prepare to make ourselves safe, so we can prepare to get away from the danger. When we have a normally functioning amygdala, this typically works pretty well. If we're in an actual physically frightening situation, our amygdala activates, we get the stress, we get the adrenaline we need to get through the moment. But what happens if our amygdala is misfiring or misdeveloped? This is exactly what happens when we've experienced childhood trauma. So after childhood trauma, our brains change in 2 primary ways, right? There's an enlargement and an overactivity of the amygdala, meaning that our brain is constantly firing off red alerts saying, hey, we're in danger. It also has a shrinkage of the hippocampus, which is the memory center, which means that it has less of a capacity to remember the times that we were safe, to remember the times that things did go okay. So this means that trauma literally primes our brain and therefore our nervous system to look for danger or to be on alert for negative experiences, which means that childhood trauma primes our nervous system to constantly be in a state of stress, which is going to lead to all of the adverse health outcomes. So, why is this important? Why focus on childhood trauma, right? In addition to this physical component of how it impacts our nervous system, we also know that childhood trauma directly impacts the subconscious mind. So, our subconscious mind is developing between the time you're born and ages 6 to 8. Some psychological theories say age 10, but we'll go with 8 for this. So during this time, your brain is creating a framework for how to quote unquote accurately perceive yourself, the world, and your place in it, meaning that your brain is forming the foundation for how you're going to perceive the entire rest of your life. You can think of this like a blank slate. Everything that happens from age 0 to 8 is like a paint spatter on this blank canvas. It gets embedded into your subconscious mind and you take it on as truth. So, the opinions of your parents, right? Money doesn't grow on trees. You have to work hard to play hard, things like this. You're not worth the time and attention, whatever it is, get turned from an opinion. It's your parents' opinion, right? You could recognize that as an adult, but as a child, you don't know the difference between truth and opinion. And so everything you experience gets taken on as a fact of this is just how the world works. This thing that I experienced is the absolute truth, which means that our childhood experiences are the beginning of limiting beliefs and the seat of our core assumption. Now, limiting beliefs are really important for this conversation because limiting beliefs are beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world around us that restrict us from reaching our full potential, right? So they're false beliefs. These aren't true, but these are the things that tell us I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm a waste of time, I'm a waste of space, I don't deserve this, right? These voices that are in our heads that at some point we're trying to keep us safe. More often than not, they're the voice of a parent who was doing the best they could in the moment, but because as children we internalize everything, every experience gets taken on as a reflection of us, right? However, limiting beliefs do just that. They limit us. They keep us stuck in cycles of self sabotage and constriction and cognitive dissonance and emotional turmoil. And because of the activation of our amygdala, they keep us stuck in a sympathetic cycle. So, how does this work? How does this work? We know that our childhood trauma primes our brain to be in a stress response. But what also happens is that because our subconscious mind forms the framework for how we see the world, that means that everything that we experience in adult life gets passed through this filter of our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind chooses, is this situation safe or unsafe? Now imagine if that framework is littered with beliefs like I'm not enough, I'm not safe, I don't deserve this, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't even try. What's going to happen? More and more and more of our adult experiences are going to get flagged as dangerous or uncomfortable or unsafe or not okay, which means that our limiting beliefs are those triggers, right? When we talk about being triggered, those are our limiting beliefs that are not only triggering this emotional cascade of believing that we're limited, that we're not good enough, but they're also triggering this physical cascade of sympathetic activation and stress, which is going to lead to all of the negative health outcomes on the physical and psychological level. So we know this, right? We know that our childhood experiences and the limiting beliefs they create set the tone for our beliefs and choices as adults. And it's important here to note that even though the majority of this research has gone towards childhood trauma, so truly traumatic experiences, we can also define trauma at any time that we had to deny ourselves, limit ourselves, or make ourselves smaller in order to feel safe. When the brain felt like we were not inherently safe and we needed to do something to make up for that, that is interpreted in the brain as trauma. That is interpreted in the brain as what becomes a limiting belief, right? So all of our childhood experiences are impacting this and forming the blueprint for our worldview, our neural networks, our self-sabotaging cycles, and our stress response. So we know that it impacts us psychologically. We know it impacts us physically through our nervous system. But what about energetically? And this is where the chakras come in. So the chakras are our energy centers within the body. They're originally found in the Vedas of Hindu philosophy. And many, many versions of the chakras exist across cultures. Some cultures have five primary, some have nine, some have 15. There are actually hundreds of chakras throughout the body. But typically, especially in Western culture, we see them represented as seven primary energy centers along the spine. What's interesting about this interpretation is that from a physical standpoint, if we look at the nervous system, there is actually a bundle of nerves, what we call a nervous system plexi or plexus, within the body at the exact location of each of these seven chakras, meaning that from an electrical perspective, from a medical perspective, these seven places in our body have a heightened energetic electrical feel and activity to them because there's actually a center of the nervous system at these points, right? So medicine is finally starting to catch up with the fact that, hey, there's something to this whole energy thing. What are the chances that these seven chakras that we see all the way back in the Vedas are now being seen from a medical perspective as bundles in the nervous system? So suddenly, already we see that the chakras are a lot more than just energetic. They're also physical. Now, what's really interesting about this is that when we look at our chakra system, our chakra develops very much like we develop as human beings, right? So this doesn't mean that you don't have a crown chakra until you're 43, right? We always have all of our chakras. But each chakra takes on what I like to call its fingerprint, its energetic blueprint in 7-year increments. So from ages 0 to 7, we're really forming the shape of our root chakra for this lifetime and on and on. So age 8 to 14, we see sacral chakra develop. 15 to 21, we see solar plexus chakra, and on and on. And this makes a lot of sense when we think about what we're doing as a human being in those age ranges, right? From 0 to 7, what's being developed? Our subconscious mind. And our root chakra represents our foundation. From ages 15 to 21, what are you primarily focused on? Figuring out who you are in this world. And what does solar plexus develop? It shows us our confidence, our motivation, our sense of self, right? When we get to crown chakra and we have age 43 to 49, what often happens when we're 49? We have a midlife crisis. Why? Because we've gone through all the chakras and we tend to start over and go back and see what needs developed, what needs honed. That's why many people experience their first big spiritual awakening around the age of 49, because it's this time when we get to go back and reassess how our energy field is working and shifting. Again, that doesn't mean that we don't always have each chakra. It just means that each one is being shaped and developed at these times. So we can see already that here, root chakra from ages 0 to 7 is corresponding to our subconscious mind. Now, what's really interesting about this is here's where we start to see how it all begins to connect together, right? We start to see that our chakras are connected to our nervous system, that each center in our nervous system is connected to our spine, to our brain. We know that our brain is the center of our limiting beliefs and our thoughts. And so suddenly, our chakra system becomes a lot more than just an energetic system. We start to see that every chakra connects to something physical. It has a physical response. It has organs that it's responsible for, but it also has our psychological connection, our emotional connection. So what does this mean? This means that when we understand the chakras, truly understand them, not just as root chakra is a glowing red ball at the base of my spine, but truly understand what root chakra means symbolically. How does it connect to our physical body? How does it connect to our psychology? What parts of us, what layer of our being is connected with this root chakra? This is when we start to form our blueprint for healing. So let's take it one step at a time, right? Hopefully by now we're all a little familiar with the chakras, right? We know root chakra is at the base of the spine, it's red. We know it's probably connected to the element of earth. We know it's our foundation, our safety, security. But what might we not know about it? Right? Root chakra, again, connects to our subconscious mind. It's looking to have our physiological needs met. Are we safe? Its core limiting belief, that limiting belief that gets wedged in there, is I'm not safe. That's a root chakra fear. When our root chakra is balanced, this can look like financial stability. We're able to trust, we're present, we're grounded, we feel safe. Our instinct in our root chakra is to have, right? We want to have those physiological needs met. Are we safe? Do we have a solid foundation? Do we feel secure? So, what does imbalance look like in the root chakra? Because again, once we know these signs and symptoms, we can start to connect it on a deeper level. So, from a psychological standpoint, an imbalanced root chakra is going to look like the monkey mind going and going. You're constantly fearful and anxious. You feel unsafe physically or emotionally. You have a victimhood mindset or a state of lack. There's never enough. You have financial difficulties, you have abandonment fears, you have body dysmorphia, or feeling uncomfortable in the physical world. So you can see here that when we feel unsafe, when we feel insecure, not in, self-worth, but in the world, when we don't feel secure, that's a sign that our root chakra is imbalanced. From the physical perspective, this is going to look like broken bones or sprains, infections in our feet and toenails, problems with our lower back, our hips, knees, our ankles, our legs, unknown bruises and bumps because we're not fully in our physical body. We might have anxiety, nightmares, hoarding or overeating, again, trying to hold on because you feel like there's not enough. And also sciatica. Sciatica is an interesting one because often we see that one directly correlated to financial difficulties. So, what's the importance of understanding these, right? And these are just a few of the signs of imbalance. This means that, let's say that you start to get an infection in your big toe. By the end of this presentation, you're going to understand a little bit about the flow of energy, and you'll be able to say, okay, something in my big toe, that is connected to my root chakra, which is connected to my feelings of safety and security. How am I not feeling safe right now? How am I not grounding myself? What does my nervous system need to feel safe? What other emotions are coming up around the idea of safety? And suddenly you've opened up this roadmap to say, I know that that big toe infection is more than just an infection because everything manifests in the physical world after the energetic world. So this means that any imbalance that we see physically happened first in the energetic, and it's just presenting itself in our physical body. And so we can walk it back from our physical and say, I know that toe infection is more than just a toe infection. So what is it symbolizing? What is my energetic, psychological self crying out for attention? What does it need to come back into balance? This is where it gets interesting. So let's move on to sacral chakra, right? We all know sacral chakra. It's right below our navel. It's connected to our kidneys, our adrenals, our sexual organs. It's usually orange. Its element is water. We connect it with creativity and sensuality and sexuality, right? But our sacral chakra also seeks to have its emotional needs met. It wants to feel safe to play and experience this physical world. Its core belief is that it's worthless. I am worthless. I'm not worth this life. You can't find that pleasure in life, right? And its instinct is to feel. It wants to experience everything. A balanced sacral chakra experiences fun and play, is sexually active and still able to orgasm, and enjoys the pleasures of life. So using our five senses to enjoy this physical experience is a very sacral chakra experience, as is creativity, the ability to be creative. So when our sacral chakra is imbalanced, this is going to look like victimhood mentality. Maybe we've suffered from emotional or sexual abuse. Childhood wounding and inner child wounds oftentimes live in our sacral chakra. Sexual imbalance, a lack of creativity, rigidity in our personality, or an inability to go with the flow, and addiction. Physically, we're going to see problems with our kidneys and adrenal glands, bladder or urinary tract infections. Our saliva and our flowing of the saliva is connected to our sacral chakra. Our blood and circulatory system, again, thinking about that water element. Our sexual organs, the fluids associated with those, our lower back and sacrum area, and also infertility. These are all signs that your sacral chakra, that this second level of self, your sacral self, is calling out for attention. So then what about solar plexus chakra? Solar plexus is located between the navel and the sternum, right? It's connected to our digestive organs. It vibrates yellow. Its element is fire. And we see that in our digestion, right? Our digestion is our ability to alchemize our food into nutrients and to release that. When we think of solar plexus, we think of our identity, our motivation, our purpose. It wants to know its value and worth. Our solar plexus core limiting belief is I'm not enough. I think almost everyone struggles with this belief at some point, and that is deeply rooted in the solar plexus chakra. When it's balanced, it feels confident, motivated, and inspired in daily life. You have a healthy sense of self, and you feel passionate and purposeful. The solar plexus instinct is to act. You want to go out into the world and take action. You want to do things. You want to follow your passion and purpose. But when it's imbalanced, from a psychological perspective, we're going to have a hard time digesting life. We're going to hold on to grudges. We're going to hold on to conversations. We're going to constantly go over and over. What did they say? What could I have said? What could I have done better? You're going to be afraid of being judged or rejected by other people. You might feel anger and frustration. That's that fire building up in our system. You might be indecisive, a lack of fire, unable to know which path to follow. You might have low energy or self esteem, narcissism and pride as well, and comparitis. So if you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, it's because we don't feel like we're enough. And that's a solar plexus issue. Physically, we're going to see issues with our stomach, with our intestines, again, constipation, diarrhea. How's that fire in your digestive system? Connections to our liver and therefore our skin, our pancreas, spleen, adrenals. Again, adrenals is one of these organs that there's a little bit of debate about, is it a sacral chakra organ or a solar plexus organ? So feel into it for you. But also your diaphragm and your vagal nerve endings. Now, what's really interesting about this connection here is that your vagus nerve is the primary nerve that activates your parasympathetic nervous system response. It's also the nerve that innervates your diaphragm. So anytime you take really deep belly breaths, you are activating your parasympathetic nervous system because it's activating your vagus nerve. Now, what's really fascinating about that is 99% of the time, like I said, most people hold on to some kind of limiting belief about I'm not enough, which we talked about how those limiting beliefs are the triggers that tip us over into an imbalanced or sympathetic energetic state. So what's really interesting is that the thing that causes most of our stress, I'm not enough, that belief, is also housed in the same place that can fix that, that has the nerve activation to bring us back into a state of rest and digest. It's just a fun little connection. So what about our heart chakra? This chakra that's located right here at the center of our sternum. It's green, it's connected with air, it's connected with love and connection and compassion. It seeks to belong, to connect, and to love the people around it. Its core limiting belief is I'm unlovable. Its instinct is to love. And so when it feels like it doesn't deserve that love, that I'm unlovable, that others could never love me, it feels cut off. But when it's balanced, our heart chakra is able to give and receive love, compassion, and support. It feels connected and supported. It doesn't have an issue reaching out for help or giving help in a balanced way. But when it's imbalanced, we see heartbreak, betrayal, and envy. We see grief and loss is big in the heart chakra. We see a lack of compassion or over empathizing, taking on other people's issues and feelings as your own. We see relationship or trust issues, an imbalance in our ability to nurture others. Either we're giving, giving, giving way too much, or we're taking, taking, taking. Again, that grief. We see issues with receiving, which is on our left side, and giving, which is our right side. We'll talk about that more later. This is also our internal capacity and stamina. So, how much of life are you able to hold? How much are you able to show up for the world? That energetic capacity is often heart chakra because it represents our balance. Physically, our heart chakra is connected to our heart and our circulatory system, our thymus and our immune system, our lymph system, our breasts, our lungs, and our arms, elbows, and hands are all connected to our heart chakra. So if we see imbalance or dis-ease in any one of these physical centers, we know that it's a deeper sign that our heart chakra is calling out for attention. So what about throat chakra, right? It vibrates blue. It's right here with our throat, our tonsils, our thyroid, our ears. Its element is ether or space. And when we think of throat chakra, we think of communicating, listening, and expressing, right? So it seeks to communicate, to express itself, but also to hear, to listen, to be heard. Its core limiting belief is I am unable to speak my truth. Now, what's really interesting is once we get past heart chakra and we get into these upper chakras, these limiting beliefs start to be an add on to a deeper limiting belief. So, the deeper into our chakra system we go, the deeper into the roots of our limiting beliefs we get. Again, thinking about how that I'm not enough is often the deepest part for a lot of people. And so you'll notice how I am unable to speak my truth is a throat chakra limiting belief. But when we really start to peel that away, oftentimes it's that you don't feel like you deserve to speak your truth. You don't think that you can speak your truth without being rejected, which is solar plexus. You don't feel safe to speak your truth, which is root chakra. So these upper chakras start to be connected to our lower chakras because, again, the chakra system is like a zipper. It zips up and all of the energy is shared between all of the chakras. It's all connected. When our throat chakra is balanced, we're able to speak our truth compassionately while listening to others. And its instinct is to speak, again, to communicate and express. When our throat chakra is imbalanced, we see an inability to communicate clearly. We might be using wishy-washy words. We might have imbalanced communication, talking too much, listening too little. We might be interrupting others or find ourselves being constantly interrupted. We might be over or under sharing. And we might not want to hear others' opinions, or we might think that other people's opinions are more valid than ours, that they deserve to be heard more. From a physical standpoint, we might see jaw issues such as TMJ. We might see issues with the throat, the thyroid, or sinuses, so chronic strep, hello throat chakra. Vertigo is also connected with our throat chakra because vertigo happens with the little bones in the inside of our ears, and ears are connected to our throat chakra. We might see thyroid imbalance, hearing problems, or issues with our teeth and gums. So what about third eye? Third eye is located between the eyebrows, right? So we have our brain, our pineal gland, which is this amazing gland that activates when we meditate, when we're in theta brainwave states that takes us to states of spiritual transcendence. Third eye chakra is often purple or indigo, and its element is light. So we can think spirituality, insight, and knowledge when we think of the third eye. It seeks to perceive and to know. It wants to know things. It wants to pull it apart. It wants to understand. The core limiting belief here is I'm not intuitive. I can't connect. Notice again how that might be a cover for a deeper limiting belief, like I'm not enough. I don't deserve to connect. I'm not worth being intuitive. When it's balanced, we're able to meditate and connect with our intuition. We're able to see the world around us beyond what meets the eye. And we can use our spiritual gifts in a balanced way, whatever those spiritual gifts are for us. Its instinct is to know. It wants to know. But when it's imbalanced, we might find ourselves being really closed-minded. We might not dream, or we might have an excess of dreams and be constantly up through the night getting messages and downloads. We might be unable to daydream, or we might lose ourselves in our daydreams. We might only believe in facts, right? We might not want anything to do with spirituality. We just want to see the proof. And we might not be able to connect or hear or trust our intuition. We're disconnected from that sense of spiritual sight. Or it could be on the opposite side, and our spiritual gifts are turned up to 100%. They're constantly on. We feel overwhelmed and overloaded. Notice how each of the chakras here has an imbalance on either side of the pendulum swing. It can be overactive with our spiritual gifts turned on to 100 and never turning off, or it can be completely underactive where we just want the science, we just want the facts. And every chakra is like this. It has this pendulum swing. So from a physical perspective, we might get vision problems, migraines, and headaches. We might see mental disorders, especially personality disorders or bipolar disorder. We might have issues with hormonal regulation. We might see sleep disorders, hallucinations, etc. These are all physical signs that our third eye needs some support. And then we get to our crown chakra. So our crown chakra is located at the top of our head. It's connected with our brain and also the pineal gland, but sometimes the pituitary gland. It vibrates violet or white, depending on which school of thought. And its element is consciousness itself. Consciousness, all that is. When we think of crown chakra, we think of divinity, wisdom, and higher connection. Our crown chakra seeks to be connected with the divine. And its core limiting belief is I am alone in the universe. There is nothing out there to save me. There's nothing out there that's greater than me. I am alone. When it's balanced, our crown chakra allows us to trust and connect to something bigger than ourselves, to feel like there is magic in the world around us and that there is more to this world than meets the eye, that there's a sense of purpose and a bigger picture. And its instinct is to just be. You've probably experienced this being when you're deep in meditation. But when we're imbalanced in our crown chakra, we'll see disassociation. So we're going to be really flighty and out of our bodies. We might feel really ill at ease in our bodies. It might be really hard for us to ground. We might be apathetic towards life, that sense of there's no point. There's no point to this. That apathy is a sign of crown chakra imbalance. We might also take on the world's problems as our own. So we're internalizing everything because if there's nothing greater than you, then it's up to you to control it all. We might have difficulty focusing. We might live in the clouds. We might often be late. Or again, we might feel completely disconnected from any kind of spiritual connection. Physically, this is where we see Alzheimer's or memory issues, learning disabilities, epilepsy. We see mental illness, depression, apathy, schizophrenia, those sides of the mental illness spectrum. We also see issues with our internal clock or our circadian rhythms, and this again is connected to our pituitary gland, which helps with our hormonal regulation. So, our circadian rhythms are the things that say you're going to wake up at this time, you're going to go to sleep at this time, and we're going to regulate all of your hormones in between to make sure that you're on that 24-hour cycle that's going to help you rest and digest and be balanced. So we know all of this now, right? This is a really brief, snappy overview of the chakras. And what I love about this is that we can take this even deeper. In fact, in the Soul Rising course, I spend 4 months teaching about just the lower four chakras. I'm actually writing a book right now, a whole book dedicated to each chakra and to what these connections are. So you can imagine that what we're covering here in this hour is just the tip of the iceberg. But what's important to understand, what's important to take away from this, is knowing that our chakras aren't just these energetic balls that we can feel when we do Reiki. They are so much more. They're connected to our physical health, they're connected to our psychological health. They are a wealth of metaphorical and symbolic wisdom that when we learn how to listen, when we learn how to look at our energetic system and understand what it's saying, it can unlock this roadmap to healing. And here's how. Here's how we tie it all together and start to heal. Before we get to that, it's important to understand the direction of energy flow. Now, why is this important? You'll remember earlier when I said that maybe you had an infection in your big toe. This is where we ask, which big toe? Which side? And this is important because just like everything has metaphor and symbolism, everything is energy, everything has a deeper meaning than just what meets the eye. Our energy flows in specific ways that we can learn to decode. So the left side is representative of receiving, feminine energy, and past. The right side is representative of giving, masculine, and future. The front of our body and the top of our body is connected to the future, and the back of our body or the bottom of our body is connected to the past. We can even take this further and look for the symbolism in things like our joints, which symbolize our flexibility, or our shoulders, carrying the weight of the world. Our shoulders represent our sense of responsibility. Our legs represent our ability to move through life. There are people who have dedicated their entire lives to mapping out how the body symbolizes this energetic flow. Louise Hay is a really famous example. But what does this mean? Right? So, this means that if we look at something that we're experiencing physically, we can decode it to walk it back to exactly what in the energetic or emotional realm is causing this physical imbalance. So, here's an example. If we have an issue with the right foot, we know that the right side is masculine, right? We know that our legs represent our ability to move confidently forward. We know that our right side is the future, but we also know that the bottom of our body is connected to the past. So when we put all these together, an issue with our right foot may represent a past experience because it's lower in the body, with a prominent masculine figure because it's that right side, that masculine side, that's holding us back from confidently living life because it's holding us back from being able to walk. It's holding us back from being able to function and move forward. Again, that future orientation of the right side in our life. So suddenly an issue with our right foot, like a sprain or, a stress fracture that we're like, oh, I stress fractured my foot. I used it too much. No, no, no. Why? My favorite question to ask with people who are struggling to see how one little injury or one little physical symptom can be indicative of something greater is to ask, two people fall down the stairs, right? One of them breaks their hip, one of them breaks their wrist. Why? Why is there that difference there? It's because where our energy is weaker, our physical body will be weaker. Again, going back to that idea of an energetic blueprint, where our energy is strong, we are physically strong. And so the places that we see imbalance or dis-ease, again, dis-ease, not flowing, in our physical body, are signs of something deeper in our energy. So let's do another one. Let's say you have a chronic issue with your left lung. We know that the left side is our feminine side, our receiving side, the one that wants to allow us to receive nutrients and support. We also know that our lung is connected with our heart chakra, which is our sense of connection and compassion and love and support. So a chronic issue with your left lung may indicate stuck feelings of grief, again, hello, heart chakra, from the past, left side, and an inability to receive support for that, right? Again, that receiving. Once again, we can start to see how the little things become maps to the bigger issues. So how do we heal? We're going to heal on 3 levels: energy, body, and mind. So when we look at our energy, we're talking about our chakras. We know that when energy is flowing through our energetic system, that's when we experience health and well-being. We also know from a physical perspective that when energy is flowing, that's when we're in a parasympathetic nervous system response or a healing state. So how do we get into a balanced flowing state in our energy? The first thing is we get curious. We get curious to understand, why isn't this chakra flowing? What's impacting it? What does it feel like to me? What does it feel like when it's flowing? And how does it feel differently now? And then we start to understand, what are the tips and techniques that work for you to connect to the essence of that chakra. So with root chakra, we're going to look at grounding or earthing. What's going to help you feel really safe and secure? Can you go walk barefoot in the grass? Can you organize your house and get your physical space, again, physical needs, to a place where they feel really good and supportive? Sacral chakra, we're going to get creative. Can you play with fingerprints? Can you go dancing? Can you sing and dance around? Can you get creative? Solar plexus chakra, this is where I am journaling comes into play. So, journaling the opposite of your limiting beliefs. I am strong. I am creative. I am enough. I am loved. I am, I am, I am. Affirming who you are in a positive way. Or, in other words, what's going to help you feel motivated and strong in your sense of self. In heart chakra, I've got these flipped here. In heart chakra, we'll see breath work, right? So can you use your lungs? Can you open your heart space to move that energy through your breath? What's going to help you feel open and connected? In throat chakra, chanting or humming. Third eye chakra, visualizing and daydreaming, leaning into your imagination. And in crown chakra, meditating, getting connected with spirit. Now, the question here might be, how is, for example, humming going to help me heal my childhood trauma? How is humming going to help me heal a limiting belief? Here's the thing. Because our limiting beliefs are impacting our energy flow, we often hold ourselves back from doing the things that would restore that energy flow because of the limiting belief. Again, we create this little triangle here. And so if we can cut to the thing that we're not doing to restore the energy flow, if we can start restoring the flow, we're going to prove to our mind that that limiting belief, it wasn't true. We can have flow here. We can show up here. We can do it in spite of the limiting belief and see that everything is fine. The more our energy starts to flow, the more we start to see that it's okay for it to flow in that way. We're kind of cutting the loop, cutting the circuit, and getting back to basic, getting back to that state of energy flow. And from a mental level, we also need to look at that limiting belief, right? So we want to get curious about finding the limiting belief. So when we notice that we're triggered, when we notice that we're upset or having a difficult time, this is where we can start asking ourselves those deeper questions of, what am I feeling right now? What am I worried about? What am I afraid of? What does that say about me? Again, we're looking for how this circumstance in your life, whether it's your spouse saying something to you that triggered you, or you're moving and you're really wildly stressed about it and your response is out of proportion. When you're triggered, you're going to look at, what is it about this situation that triggered me? And why? What am I worried about? How did I internalize that? What do I believe about myself in this situation? What's the I am statement underneath this? So if your spouse said something that really triggered you and you sit down and you think through, what am I worried about? What do I believe about myself? It might be, well, he said this and it made me feel like I'm not doing enough. It made me worry that he's going to leave me because I'm not enough. And there's our I am statement, I'm not enough. And then we can think about, when was the first time that I remember thinking or feeling this way? Where does this belief come from? And we can realize, oh, you know what? I used to feel that way all the time with my mom. I never did enough to make her notice me. I never felt like I earned her love. She taught me that love was conditional. And so now I'm worried that if I'm not doing enough, my partner's going to leave me. And suddenly we see that that one little comment from our spouse was so much more to our minds and to our energy. And so we want to find the core limiting belief. And then we want to work on releasing that by going back to those energetic states, to our chakras, and doing things that are going to reinforce the positive belief. So once we find that limiting belief, we can say, you know what? I can let that go. I can choose to believe something new instead. And we can put a positive belief in its place and pair it with an action to activate our energy in that space. So I'm not enough. We know that is a solar plexus limiting belief. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, my new belief is I am enough. And I'm going to pair that with the I am journaling to help increase my energy flow in that particular area of life, in that particular area of self. I'm going to increase the energy flow there to help seal in this healing. And because we know that that process of getting triggered and figuring it out is going to push us into a stressed space, we also want to be paying attention to our body, to our nervous system, by moving from a sympathetic or stressed state to a parasympathetic or balanced state. So we can do this by working through our limiting beliefs, again, getting rid of those triggers, working through those and tying the knots, by balancing our energy, because again, we know when our energy is flowing, our nervous system is flowing as well. So when we do those activating actions for our chakras, but we can also take care of our physical body. Again, going back to the basics. How are we eating? Are we exercising? Are we getting enough sleep? We can also never underestimate the importance of 3 deep breaths. Do you remember when we were in solar plexus and we were talking about why belly breaths activate the parasympathetic nervous system? Because of its connection to that big vagus nerve. 3 deep breaths, there's actually studies on this, are enough to take you from a sympathetic stress state to a parasympathetic or balanced state. This is also where somatic work comes really handy, or even just putting your hands on your heart chakra and being present with yourself. When we can put all of these together, we start to see this roadmap to healing, right? So again, this is a lot of information. That's why we have the workbook. That's why we have chances to continue learning about this, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. You can come back to this presentation again and again, but what I want you to walk away with from today is this understanding that our nervous system is the gateway between our body and our mind. When we understand how it gets triggered, we can understand how to heal it. We want to understand that limiting beliefs impact us on all levels, not just our thoughts, but on the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic sides, which means that while they impact us on all levels, we can also change them on all levels, right? We can change them by working with our energy and our chakras. We can change them by working through our mental and emotional symptoms. We can change them by taking care of our physical body. By learning how to interpret and read our energy fields, again, by being able to look at that chronic lung issue and say, oh, you know what? I'm actually holding on to grief that I never processed, and I'm not letting myself receive support. Once you have that awareness, you can then start taking conscious actions, making conscious choices to choose differently, to restore balance, to process the emotion and the limiting belief, and to step into a new, healed reality. And our chakras offer us this roadmap to healing on all levels through their connection with all levels of our being. This also means that healing can be simple so long as we know how to listen. How often do we feel like we're chasing our tails, trying to figure out, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? What do I do? When we understand how to read our energy and we can bring it back down to basics of, I have this lung issue, it's on my left side. What does left side symbolize? It symbolizes my heart chakra. It symbolizes feminine energy, receiving energy. So where am I holding on to the emotions associated with heart chakra, to grief, to feeling disconnected? Where am I not allowing myself to receive? Or, like in that situation where your spouse says something that really triggers you, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Well, it feels like a punch to the stomach. Okay, what's the stomach? That's my solar plexus. That's my center of motivation. What am I feeling about that situation? What is it that I'm thinking? Well, I'm sitting here thinking I'm so mad at him because I'm actually really just scared that he's going to leave. Why am I scared he's going to leave? Because I feel like I'm not enough. When we can see these connections, when we can understand our energy, what each chakra symbolizes, how the energy flow works, again, left versus right side, top versus bottom, and how that connects to our physical nervous system states and our psychological thoughts. Healing can become really simple because then we can realize what I need to do is sit with my grief and let it be processed. What I need to do is activate my solar plexus a little bit more and do something that's going to help me stand in my confidence. Suddenly, instead of just putting band aid on top of band aid on top of band aid, you're actually getting to the root. Now, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. Again, I teach months-long courses about how to do this process and really integrate it. And so it's okay if it feels like this is all just kind of jangling around your brain and not quite landing. The important thing to take away from today is what each chakra symbolizes, how it's connected to the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic space, and starting to play with in your own life. How is energy showing up for you? What's showing up in your physical life? How can you start using this to decode your experience and get to the root of what needs healing? And in that workbook, there are over 24 journal prompts to help you through this process as well. So as you're integrating this information, you can go to the workbook. I'll put the link in the chat and start working through it for your own life. So I know that this was a lot of information all at once. And like I said, we're just scraping the tip of the iceberg here. So if you're interested in diving deeper into this, if you have questions, if you want to work with me one-on-one, or you want to join our 4-month Soul Rising course where we take this and we stretch it over 4 months and we dive deep into every aspect of the chakras and our healing while combining it with shamanic and Reiki work, let me know. I would love, love, love to hear from you. And in the meantime, thank you so, so much for tuning in. I hope that this brought you some aha moments, some inspiration, some connections. And I hope that you'll start to take this into your daily life and give you a little bit of hope that healing, you have everything you need to heal. You have that blueprint to heal within you.